All right, let's bring this back to kind of essentially the real world, the gross world that we live in. We've already been kind of down and dirty with the proteins and the calcium and the sodium and the action potentials. Now I want to try and bring this back out. And what I want to do is I want to talk about what a twitch is, what TREP-A is, what tonus is, wave or temporal summation, and tetanus. What is it? And we all deal with tetanus, hopefully not the Clostridium infection that causes tetanus, which is why everybody, including myself, should have a tetanus shot living in an agricultural area like we do. Before I get into this, and this is where we're going to end, if any of you have ever participated in track and field, you know that if all of a sudden one of your sprinters hurts herself, you don't send in a marathoner to take her place. And conversely, if your marathoner can't run, you don't send in a sprinter. Why? And we'll get to that. So we've already talked about this, the whole world of the action potential coming in from the motor neuron, sending that impulse, that spark down through the T-tubules, the T-tubules then stimulating the sarcoplasmic reticulum. That is going to then release calcium. We pull back the tropomyosin, you know the story all the way around. Important thing to keep in mind, ATP, that energy source, breaks the bond. It doesn't do the power stroke, it breaks it. This was a big deal when we figured it out a number of years ago. We always thought ATP did the power stroke. It doesn't. Keep that in mind. We have an exam in a week. This is what we want to do. Well, essentially, this is what we're going to talk about with twitch, TREP-A, tonus, summation, and tetanus. So, twitch, here's this myogram, this trace that is going to plot essentially time against the amount of contraction. And a simple twitch looks like this. There's a little bit of a latent period. Remember, there's a lot that's got to go on. You stimulate the muscle, and that muscle has to have all the calcium move, and the calcium has to release, and then it has to grab onto the TNC, and it has to pull. So there's typically about a 5 millisecond latent period where you stimulate it and nothing happens. But then we go through contraction, and then we go through relaxation. So what a twitch is one stimulus. You just hit it once, and you watch what that myofiber does. Now, the only issue that I have here with this x-axis in the amount of milliseconds, it depends on the fiber. Some, it might be maybe 40 seconds of contraction and then 40 seconds of relaxation. But that's okay. You at least get the idea. Also, this one is equal with the contraction and the relaxation, at least pretty close to. So that's variable. But what this represents is one stimulant to that individual myofiber. There's a twitch. Maybe some of you, I know I have twitches right before I fall asleep. When I go from that wake state to the sleep state, all of a sudden I'll have muscles contract, and that's a simple twitch. That's all it is. From here, we can go to TREP-A. Now with TREP-A, we can start to get into a little bit more of that chemistry. TREP-A looks like this. As you can see, stimulus is here, there's the amount of contraction. Stimulus is here, there's the amount of contraction. And the important thing to know is the stimulus is at the same level. So you've gone through full relaxation and you fire up again. Full relaxation, fire up again. You might wonder, well, why? Why does it get continuously larger and larger and larger? Here's why. After this, let's say, for example, this one takes place, you've still got calcium floating around. It hasn't all been pulled into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So the next stimulus that comes throws out more calcium to add on top of what's already there. So you get more of the tropomyosin pulled back, so you go higher and higher. And what it ends up looking like is essentially what we perceive as a straight line. Twitch, simple. Trape, I think, pretty simple. Tonus is another one that I think is pretty simple. I'm not going to show you a myogram on this one. But tonus, I know that I've said a number of times, yeah, I need to lose some weight, I need to get toned. What does it mean to be toned? To be toned means that you have to have your muscles essentially at a maximum state ready for contraction. And so this is an example of tonus. If I lost a lot of weight, I would not have a physique like this. You wouldn't see the definition like this. For those of you who work out, for those of you who work those muscles, work the core, what you're doing is not just getting rid of fat, and you're not just building the muscle for a six-pack or an eight-pack. What you're doing is you're making sure that you have those muscles that are completely and totally ready to contract. And in fact, they're almost in a state of contraction, just a little bit of contraction. So we've got tonus on top of trape and twitch. Then these last two, summation and tetanus, they're gonna kind of go together. Here's the deal with summation. As I mentioned before, it can be called, I think I mentioned before, wave summation or temporal summation, depending on the book. It essentially means the same thing, but what we're going to do is sum, let me go way out there, sum twitches. So remember, a twitch went up and then it went all the way down, and it was a simple little thing. Summation is when we have an impulse, but before it gets all the way down to the resting state, before it relaxes completely, we hit it again. And when we hit it again, it's already partially contracted, so it goes higher. And it looks like this. Ignore the thing on the right for a minute. So if you notice, the tension doesn't go all the way down to zero before you get hit again. So this is a super tiny look at it. On the right-hand side, I mean, for me to do this, I'm going through summation. So it would essentially look like this if we changed the x-axis. And that should look similar to this. So when we have a nice smooth move of a muscle like this, it's all about summation. Now when we get to the top and it's this continually sustained maximum contraction like this, kind of like I mentioned before in the world of rigor mortis, when you are at this full-on contraction, all of a sudden we flatline, and this is what we call tetanus. Now tetanus is this maximum sustained contraction, and you can attain essentially tetanus if you are working out at the gym, you're lifting weights. But that's not typically what we think about when we hear tetanus. What we typically think about when we hear tetanus is I need a shot. Well, here's why. If you end up with Clostridium tetani, that bacteria, which is it's ample around here, St. Clair County, Sanilac County, Huron County, because we're very, very agrarian and agricultural. Yeah, you get infected with that and you end up with this. Now here's a painting of an individual going into tetanus, and he's not attempting, but due to the infection, you can see all the muscles are in complete and total maximum contraction. This, individuals can break bones. It's a horrendous thing to be in. This is probably the most famous image. You'll see it in most textbooks. And I thought, well, yeah, I don't know how long ago this was painted. So here's some real images. Here's an infant on the right-hand side that's in tetanus. And here's an individual on the left-hand side. So very reminiscent of the painting. So it's a real deal. It's a real thing. So if it's been, I think it's 5 years, 10 years, you haven't had a tetanus shot, yeah, go out and get a tetanus shot. You step on a rusty nail, it's not the rust that causes the tetanus. What it is it's the bacteria that we have in the soil all around here. Now, lastly, this whole idea of marathoners and sprinters. We tend to have type 1 fibers and type 2 fibers. These are myofibers. They're also called red fibers and white fibers. They behave differently. We all have a mix of them, but some of us end up with a lot of type 1s, some of us end up with a whole lot of type 2s. So what does this mean? Well, type 1s have a lot of mitochondria, and they have a lot of blood flow going to them, which makes them look a little bit red. These myofibers can go and go and go and go and go. Those are your marathoners. For example, maybe some of you have Professor Frank as an instructor. I believe this was from the Athens Marathon. She has a lot of type 1 red myofibers. So she can tear up a marathon. On the flip side, the type 2s, the whites, they don't have as much blood flow going in there. What that means is they can do their job really good. They've got a lot of enzymes to help clear out the acetylcholinesterase or acetylcholinesterase. I have to slow down, I've only got about 2 minutes. Acetylcholinesterase, and the enzymes help to make those muscles go really fast, really fast, really fast. So an example of someone with type 2 is the fastest man in the world, Usain Bolt, an incredible sprinter. I mean, he's left everybody in the dust. But the thing is, when you look at these two side by side, Patricia Frank could smoke Usain Bolt in a marathon. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't do it. He's too type 2. Usain Bolt, of course, being the fastest man on the planet, could smoke Professor Frank because he's all type 2. So if you end up with a lot of type 2, you have short bursts of energy. If you have a lot of type 1s, you have not short bursts of energy, but you have long lasting. If you're into cycling, Mark Cavendish is loaded with type 2. He's an incredible sprinter. If we go to type 1, Eddie Merckx, probably the best long distance cyclist that has ever been out there. Same thing. So we can compare these, whether it's running, whether it's playing sports, playing hockey, playing basketball, football, doesn't matter. Most of us have a mix of type 1s and type 2s. I tend to lean a little bit myself towards type 1s. I don't sprint well on my cycle. I can do long distances a lot better than sprint. So with that being said, let's wrap this one up and try and shift over to what we talked about earlier, which is the nervous system.